Yeah, I guess I'll start and
Yeah.
Chair. We've had really good conversations. We appreciate the leadership of the governor. We had good conversation with Senator Lucas, obviously our Northern Virginia delegation. We remain optimistic that everyone, I think it's been pretty clear, they understand the value of Metro and that we need a stable, healthy Metro going forward. And we look forward to them completing their budget process. And, we stand ready to help in any way possible.
Yeah, I'll echo those comments. And we had really good meetings, not only with the leadership of Senator Lucas and the governor, but we met with several members of the Senate Finance Committee over the last 3-4 weeks. The House members, Delegate Sickles in particular, has been extremely helpful. So I think we're pretty optimistic coming out of this. That again, people not only understand the importance, but the value of Metro to not only Northern Virginia, but the region. So people understand that.
We're just going to we're going to go around. We're just going to go around the room and we're going to do it. Thank you.
And just wanted to follow up on, I saw your tweet, I think it was yesterday, talking about ridership numbers being up overall. Can you dive into those trends a little bit and what you think is driving that right now?
Sure. We're really, we're kind of optimistic around what we're seeing is our base ridership, if you will, seems to be coming back, which is, traditional commuter hours. So yesterday, again, was very close to 2 weeks ago where we had our highest 8 to 9 a.m. hour. We're having more federal employees on the system as well, which are kind of, again, that base commuter. The reason we're so kind of optimistic is as we grow our base commuter, as we get out of our seasonality changes, as you're all well aware, when you hit spring in DC, ridership really goes up because economic activity, so both that's visitors, but people just like being out and doing stuff, February and January, not as active outside and all the other type of things. So as we get our base back, we believe that will help continue moving the whole direction forward. And that's both on rail and bus. Rail obviously increasing more because bus never went down as much during the pandemic and also increased, kind of recovered faster. So, we're watching these trends. We're very excited too. Some of the stations that places like McLean, Reston, Dulles Airport, places like that on the Silver Line are actually going above average of the rest of the system growing. So we'll have more information as that, but we have a really transparent dashboard as well. So all things in our mind going in the right direction.
Okay. I had a question about Eastern Market last week. Revealed today, I guess 48 so far have been found with collector shoe assembly issues, cracks in them. Start doing the math for collector shoes. That means essentially 1 out of every 2 trains that you've inspected had a cracked collector shoe. If 4 per train car and a 6-car train, 24 of these on each 6-car train. Am I correct?
So Tom, the fleet is just the 7K fleet. It's been inspected. It's almost 700 cars times 4. We have a 1.5% failure rate.
1.8, he said?
Sorry, 1.8, yeah.
So that means like 1 out of every 50, and between 2 train cars, you have nearly 50 of these if there's 4 per rail car. So my point is...
There's four per rail car.
Yeah,
yeah,
per rail car, right?
Per car.
24 per 6-car train, so that means roughly every 2 trains, on average, would have had 1.
Oh, sorry, the language you said cars versus trains. So that's why I was confused.
My basic question is, why, if these are inspected every 60 days, were so many out there with cracks when you inspected them again? Well,
respectfully, there's not that many out there. I guess that's what's, I'm sorry, finding it confusing. We have about 48 out of hundreds and hundreds. And as our Deputy Chief Safety Officer mentioned, by no way do we believe that these are a failed device or failed piece of equipment. We are going extra cautious in removing anything that even has a sign of a stress fracture because we don't want to have that risk. So very, very small amount, and we're being extra proactive. Now we're going to go into a deeper investigation with the original equipment manufacturer and our train manufacturer to see if there is any analysis related to defective part, wearing, that type of thing. So we're now doing a much more robust inspection than what was originally designed by the OEM. And now we're also inspecting our legacy fleet, which to my understanding before going to this meeting, we haven't found anything yet. So again, we think very small amount of issues overall in the fleet, but we're being extra cautious in taking everything offline and replacing it just to be absolutely sure.
And was this something prior to this? Did the 60-day inspections look at collector shoes at all, or you're just going to look at them more thoroughly in the future?
Yeah, again, confusion between a shoe and an assembly. Shoes come off in the nature of business all the time in railroads all over the world. So that's really not an issue. The assembly is inspected, but this is a more robust inspection. because we were doing it just as the OEM recommendation. So it's a visual, you go through it. Now we're going through it in a much more complicated way. And again, anything that we find, we're immediately just taking the assembly apart and replacing with a brand new one. So, this could be as small as on a piece of concrete, you see a little crack. That doesn't mean the sidewalk's not safe. It means, something over time could build. We're just proactively saying, we're not even willing to take that risk. Let's get that off the train.
My last question had
Sure.
to do with the certifications,
Sure.
which is obviously not nearly as big an issue as it was a few years ago, but how is it possible that this is still an issue at all, and what's being done to make sure that in the future we never have somebody not properly recertified running a train?
Sure, I think that's a fair question. I would say it's pretty apple to banana kind of analogy of 2 years ago. I wasn't here at the time, but that was a deliberate decision by the organization to waive requirements around certification. This was a gap in coming from the clinic in a return to service program if you've been out for an extended period of time. And sometimes we have someone that might be out for, we could have an operator that is pregnant, that's going to be out for a period of time. We have someone that has a personal issue or an injury of some sort, and they're out for a period of time. They got fully trained, it's just in the return to service process, one component of that certification, because is more of a timing of how long the certification was versus the training period. The way to fix all this is the two approaches that we've, basically since I've been here, we're working on, which is digitalizing the process, so it can't do that. And now we have one little piece that I think they said about another week will even prevent that to happening. And then two, we're examining the entire, if you will, soup to nuts process of training and certification. In some ways, we're pretty out of alignment with the rest of the industry. We have too much time here. Not the right type of necessary or the best type of testing in other ways. So we're rebuilding that whole process, and by June 30th, we hope to have a much more robust, I would say, training and certification that is designed on capabilities of an operator versus testing. So kind of maybe an analogy of kids, or students, where you get standardized tests versus actual levels of quality and understanding and ability to operate under different conditions. And we want to move to a more robust training process. So the team is working on that. 3 operators were found in this return to service piece, and we've dealt with that.
And Tom, I think the key takeaway is it's now going to be centralized into one area. I think that's the key takeaway here. And I think that's really going to help in addition to
exactly.
the steps the team is taking.
A lot of this is the larger cultural stuff I think we've been working on Metro. If you look at NTSB or WMSC reports for years and years and years, first of all, most everything is a documentation issue on us from a safety point of view, but that could lead to a safety concern. A lot of this is driven, as Chair mentioned, just a big siloed organization. And one of the things I'm really proud of what we've accomplished the last year and a half is we are breaking those silos down on a daily basis. We're becoming a more integrated, collaborative team. I mean, that presentation you saw out there, I think wouldn't even happen the same way before, which is you have a head of safety and the head of rail operations jointly presenting, because they kind of co-own the outcome of safe service. So that's what I'm the most proud of. And when we have that, all things can get better over time, because we're building a culture. When you hear safety culture is based on empowerment, collaboration, and trust, and transparency, and that's what I think the values are really starting to percolate here at Metro. So just keep working away across.
Back to the budget, I was wondering, we talked months ago about the $750 million budget deficit for the upcoming fiscal season. What commitments have you got so far in filling that from DC and Maryland? I know you've talked to the General Assembly there, and with DC, I think DC committed was $200 million. Just tell me where we're at with those two, and then what you've got so far from Virginia.
Yeah, so in DC, I think it was pretty publicly acknowledged, the mayor, Chairman Mendelson, and Transportation Chair Allen sent us a letter saying they were committing to $200 million to make sure that Metro is here. They understand the value of Metro very uniquely here, obviously, in the district. So we really appreciate their commitment, and we're working with them closely. I believe the mayor does a proposed budget sometime maybe mid-March. Sorry, I don't have the exact date on that. So I'm sure she'll figure out how to take that commitment and then put it into those budget document process then. On the Maryland side, I believe just today, the bill got approved in the House side, which was lifting the 3% cap for a period of, I think it was 2 years, the way they wrote it, and then doing the funding agreement that Governor Moore put in his budget. So in Maryland, things seem to be going right through the process just as we were hoping for, and really appreciate both the governor's leadership, Today was Chair Corman runs the Transportation Committee, and that's what I think got approved today, just as we were in there. So, and then we just talked about the Virginia piece.
Well, I was wondering with that, how much, it was a $750 million deficit. It looks like combined this will be roughly 450 or so. What happens with the other $300 million deficit, or am I reading this wrong?
Yeah, we can get the team to go through it, and
Sure.
we have the documents pretty laid out. So 750 was our projection in the spring. Then there's all these components of that. So we have a $95 million savings that we did last year that we're carrying over. We found how to do $50 million of reoccurring administrative costs. I'm putting a 0% on all the employees for the year. We have a 12.5% fare increase. We have some service tweaks and cost savings there. So it's a variety of things. The $480 million is committed from the 3 jurisdictions at the moment, and then we obviously have our preventive maintenance fund, which is not something we want to take from our capital fund, but that's how we would fill the difference, and that's the proposal to the board, as the board chair mentioned. Now it's going through the public process, and then we look forward to the board. Sometime in April would be the way to finalize that budget. So happy to give you all the documents and give you more detail on that, but it's kind of laid out in flow charts of how the 750 ends up where we are.
And we had seen a quote from Senator Lucas earlier about Metro needing oversight. Without getting into the details, how would you characterize your conversations or negotiations with her? I know she's one of the big purse string holders in Virginia.
Yeah, well, one, I wouldn't classify anything as negotiations. That's not our job. We're not elected officials, and we very much respect their roles. We appreciate the meeting. She's an incredibly busy person. It's arguably the busiest week of legislative calendar every 2 years in Virginia. She gave us a fair amount of time. I think one, she understands the importance of transit, and I think what I was really felt heartened about is she understands the people that are really impacted when we don't have transit service. And we talked a lot about her priorities are healthcare and education. And we kind of all got together and talked about, well, Metro gets people to healthcare and education. And without Metro, there's a lot of people, that, especially our commuter base, maybe people of color, people who are low income. How are we going to get them to hospital? How are we going to get the jobs? How are we going to get the education? And I really appreciated her interaction on that. And then I think she came out with a tweet and acknowledged how important Metro was. And more importantly, she talked about how we need a long-term dedicated funding source and how we should stop every few years having the kind of the Metro financial crisis and once and for all, as a region, come together and solve this.
Yeah. Look, the meeting was very encouraging, and she did give us a lot of time. And she hasn't given a lot of meetings, or granted a lot of meetings. So that in and of itself was very encouraging. And I think this coming week or the next 5 days, including the weekend, just eyes open, what happens in the Virginia Senate, moving forward, because now that she's introduced her budget, now the committee, the Finance Committee and the Senate itself will, work through that. So the next 2 weeks in Virginia are going to be, important, and the House, has already passed something, so, and good language in there, lifting of the cap, the stuff that, people were looking for.
Just one last question.
Sure.
Regarding the future, this is the 1-year fiscal cliff we've been talking about. You've always talked about, Randy, the need for more dedicated funding to Metro. How do you kind of navigate that as you're getting through this? What are the kind of next steps for finding a way to get that through?
Yeah, listen, I'll be clear. If we don't find this thing's going to be cut and paste, and everyone's going to continue to be really sick and tired of talking about it and get more and more frustrated, and it could be leading to the death by 1,000 cuts, right? So one way or the other, we got to modernize WMATA, and modernizing is not just our digital infrastructure about record keeping. It also means how we want to operate trains and buses. It also means how we interact as a transit network, because there's 14 other transit operators in our region. We have to figure out how all of us are trying to get more people on transit. It's good for the environment, it's good for jobs, it's good for equity, all of those kind of things. We need to focus on that. So, I think that what I'm really optimistic about, I guess the best way is everyone seems to be saying that same message. And whether they love Metro or dislike Metro or whatever, everyone is like, enough is enough. This has been going on for 45 years. We got to solve operating. We got to solve capital. What do we want to be? The board has been very active on this, a lot of elected officials. So I think as we get to the stability here with this budget, it's going to create that space. Now, mind you, not a lot of space, but enough space for all the people to get really serious and say, okay, what is the plan moving forward, and get out of the Band-Aid stuff.
I think the transition that's taken place the last 18, 19 months since Randy's been here, and the story of what's happening and the talk of, we got to get through this crisis, but that naturally leads to that discussion about the need for long-term funding. Because they don't want to go through this every year or every 2 years either. And the localities need predictability. So the focus has been, yes, we got to fix the 2 years, but yet because of the discussions we've had in all 3 jurisdictions, people are beginning to think about, okay, now we've really got to tackle the ultimate issue, and that is, some form of dedicated funding here. It just has to be, because they too want the predictability.
You made that point earlier, Randy, about the safety culture changing in recent year or two. Could you give just a couple examples of ways that the safety culture has improved, and then a couple of areas where you still hope to see that kind of improvement?
Yeah, well, safety culture, that term, I would be cautious with that term, because a lot of people use that term that, in due respect to them, don't really understand what that term is. So you have to really kind of be in an operational kind of entity to probably fully understand what safety culture. So to me, and I used to have the opportunity to be a chief safety officer, at the end of the day, we need employees that are empowered, believe they're supported, non-punitive, collaborative, and the ultimate thing is transparency. And the one things I talked to the board when I talked about this opportunity was, I'm going to be very transparent. And I did that my first week I got here. We had a cable fire at DuPont. I think it was like a 4th day on the job. I went down in the middle of the night. I took pictures of what was going on. And people were like, what are you doing? And it's like, listen, fire trucks upstairs. We know there was a fire. If we're not willing to acknowledge what's wrong, you can never honestly fix a problem. And I think we've been really intentional about bringing things forward in a transparent way. Even when we don't have all the answers or everything that happened, like today with our assembly issue, we want the board to be aware. We want the public to be aware. We're not hiding anything. It's the community system. People that work here, live here, use the system every day. I take the system every day. Clearly, I want a safe system. So I think what we're trying to do here is really make employees feel like they have direct responsibility of safety. Our job is to train them and give them the conditions to be safe. We're also going to have a high level of accountability on that, and then drive on transparency. So today's, I think, was a good example of doing that. We had, other examples could be how we're working through our red signal issue. We didn't have to media didn't know that we had 2 red signal violations last week. We brought that up because we think that's important to do. 2 employees had human factor issues. We are going to solve that with automatic train operation. The engineered solution is safer than the manual solution, and we are trying to drive that forward. We're also working on things like, we have capital projects on ventilation. We have things like elevators and escalators. We have, even the signage leads to a safer system. We have more police patrols out on the system. So safety culture is all of us owning it. We have a special Teams channel that we created just after I got here, where all of the employees in a building like this can actually report maintenance issues in real time to our maintenance control desk. So that means now we've activated hundreds, if not a couple thousand people that would have no access in the old way to know how to report a crack on the floor, a light out, anything like that. And now they just take a picture, bam, and immediately those things are getting fixed. So we brought the entire sense of ownership to the team. And it's a never-ending process. So, when someone goes 3 years from now, oh, well, Randy Clark did this quote and said safety culture is great. Yeah, and it's going to be better in 5 years. It's going to be in 10 years. It's every organization needs to continually improve and be honest about that. So there will be never an end to the safety culture journey. And the more everyone understands that is a continuum, I think the healthier the conversation is. So sorry to go a little more philosophical on you, but it's kind of a very nuanced thing. Yeah. So okay.
Just and kind of piggybacking off of, talking about safety from an infrastructure standpoint, but also talking about a public safety standpoint, talking about, adding more officers, increased patrols, increased visibility. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to. You'll probably see we put out some press stuff on that earlier today, social media. So we always have officers on trains, on buses, in stations. The reality is, we don't have thousands of police officers every day. We have 14,000 plus bus trips a day, probably 1,250, 1,300, I think it is, rail trips on an average weekday. Obviously, it's impossible to have a police officer everywhere. And by the way, we don't need a police officer everywhere. We are an incredibly safe system overall, right? What we want to do is more presence. So one, it starts at the gates. We've actually made our gates better, and we're going to keep working on that. Two, we're going to have layers of security. So now we have officers, but we also have a bunch of special police officers. So we're doing more patrols. The idea is you have someone in high visibility vest that is now able to deal with security situations. So a good example is at Eastern Market last week, one of our special police officers was the first person to see the issue and help evacuate people out of the station. We had everyone on the station in 2 minutes, right? Because we had other security personnel there. We have 30,000 plus cameras in the system. We now have 8 to 10 crisis intervention specialists. We're working very closely with our partners, whether it's MPD or the other regional partners, real-time video monitoring and control from our new control center. So we are pushing on all levers, and the crime is down, I think, 13-14% year over year. We really think that's going to continue to go in the right direction. And the more people on the system also makes the system safer. It's like a park, I say all the time. An empty park, kind of uncomfortable. A busy park with lots of people in it, people feel very comfortable having lunch or being with their kids.